My name is Sergeant Archivist Serin Hale, 132nd Cadian Remnant, attached to Field Command under Colonel Marek Dane. This record is submitted under clearance string AUX 777, unhallowed. If you are reading this, I pray you have the sense to seal this archive again. We made planetfall at 0400 local on Gorst Null, designation, Abandoned Agri Shrine World. Imperial charts listed it as safe for reclamation and crop reseeding. The war has left many worlds in want of food. A dead farm world with tillable land was a blessing, or so we believed. The first thing we noticed was the ground. It looked ordinary enough, brown soil, patches of overgrowth, low haze across the plains, but it was soft, too soft, like walking on waterlogged peat. But the scanners read low hydration, almost bone dry. I remember Corporal Fenn stepping off the ramp. His boots sank half an inch. "Ground's warm," he said. Warm. No sun on our backs yet. No geothermal vents. No reason. But I said nothing. We had orders to establish perimeter trenches and a forward operating command. The air was humid, but no insects, no birds, no motion in the grass, only the humming. We thought at first it was atmospheric distortion or engine reverb from the landers. But when the engines went silent, the hum remained. A faint, steady resonance, like someone whispering a lullaby into the soil. We dug. Lass cutters and entrenching tools bit into the earth, until one of the privates, Talon, made a sound I will not forget. A half choke, half scream. I turned and saw him staring down at his shovel. The dirt he had raised was not dirt. It was red. And it glistened. At first, we thought clay. Then we saw it drip. Fenn reached down, touched it with one gloved finger, and recoiled. "It's warm," he repeated, voice thin. Lieutenant Strake ordered us to keep digging, because orders are orders and questions come later. But the deeper we cut, the more of it we found. The trench walls were not soil and stone. They were fibrous, layered, striated like, no. I did not want to think the word yet. It was Private Talon who said it for all of us. "Sir, this looks like muscle." And then the ground moved. Not much, just a tremor, a pulse, like blood being pushed through a vein. A rolling wave beneath our boots, enough to make every man freeze where he stood. The hum deepened, faint but rhythmic, like a heartbeat. Colonel Dane ordered comms uplink to Fleet Command. Before the signal could transmit, the ground beneath Corporal Fenn opened, no, parted, like lips, and he dropped to his waist in an instant. He screamed, thrashing, boots kicking, hands clawing at the edge as the soil tightened around him like a swallowing throat. We pulled. We could not pull him out. The last thing he managed to say, before the earth took him, was whispered, "It's growing." We did not sleep that first night. After the ground swallowed Corporal Fenn, every man stood with his weapon, raised, waiting for the earth to open again. But it didn't. The soil rested flat and still, as though nothing had happened at all. Only the humming remained. Low, patient. Lieutenant Strake ordered a full perimeter sweep. Standard spacing, 2-man patrols. I joined one of the tech priests, Margos Kill 3V, whose Vox Grill voice was always flat, always calm. He knelt where Fenn had disappeared and drove a servo probe into the soil. The probe did not click against stone or hard bedrock. It slid through something pliant. The return data displayed filament density inconsistent with plant root systems. Too thick, too uniform, more akin to striated tissue, the Magos stated reverently. Organized, deliberate. I felt a coldness deeper than fear. "Are you saying the ground is alive?" I asked. "No." The Magos tilted his head. "I am saying it is grown." That was somehow worse. We cut samples for analysis. The last scalpel sliced clean through what we thought were roots from the surface overgrowth. But when separated, the roots flexed faintly in the air, as though resisting the cut. They had vascular channels. They oozed a clear, viscous fluid that smelled faintly of sweet rot, like fruit left too long in summer heat. One guardsman vomited. Another crossed himself and whispered the litany of the Emperor's mercy. I admit, I felt both responses pressing inside me. We carried the samples back to camp, sealed in biostasis jars, though no one believed quarantine still meant anything here. Not after the ground breathed, because it did. As dusk crept in, the soil released a slow exhale, a warm, moist wind rising from below, carrying with it that same sickly sweetness. Something floral now, thick, heavy, like the scent from a greenhouse in full bloom. But there were no flowers, no trees, no crops, only the grass, swaying like hair over living flesh. We heard commotion near the eastern lookout. Sergeant Dawn was standing at the base of a slope, staring up at a cluster of trees that had not been visible when we landed. Except they weren't trees. Their trunks were too smooth, their bark too soft. And they moved, not in the breeze, but with the slow expansion and contraction of lungs. One of the men fired, panic-triggered. The last round burned through the nearest trunk, and it bled, thick, coagulated, the same color as human blood left exposed for hours. The tree shuddered. A long groan echoed through the grove, like a sigh of relief rather than pain. Then the humming changed. It was no longer atmospheric. It was voices, soft, murmuring, a litany spoken by tongues that had forgotten they once belonged to human mouths. Magos Kill 3V spoke first, mechanical voice almost reverent. We are standing in a constructed ecosystem. A garden. I felt the name forming before anyone spoke it. A garden of Nurgle, and we were already standing inside it. The fog rolled in without warning. One moment. The air was clear enough to see the ridges beyond the plains. The next, a pale, wet mist swept across the field like a curtain being drawn. Every sensor reading blinked uncertain, Auspex returning static, Vox signals warping with soft interference. It smelled sweet. Not the sharp sweetness of rot this time. Something gentler, almost comforting. A scent like wilted flowers pressed between pages of a book. Then came the shapes. At first, I thought they were more trees, silhouettes swaying in the mist. But they moved against the direction of the breeze. Slow steps, careful, purposeful. Cloaked figures, robed in mottled, green-stained fabric that hung from their bodies like lichen. They walked bent, heads low, hands folded in front as if in prayer. Gardeners. No one spoke the word, but we all knew it. Lieutenant Strake raised his lasrifle and called out, "Identify yourselves. By order of the Imperium, state allegiance." The shape stopped. The closest figure lifted its head. The hood peeled back with a wet sound. Fabric fused to skin, revealing a face so serene it made my blood run cold. The features were familiar. I had seen that face before. Corporal Fenn. Not exactly him. No, the proportions were wrong. Stretched, softened, reshaped like wax left near a flame. But the eyes, the warmth in the eyes, they recognized us. The figure smiled, not cruelly, not with malice, with tenderness. "We prune what must suffer," it whispered, voice like 1,000 petals brushing together. "We nurture what is ready to bloom." Strake fired. The last bolt tore through its chest, leaving a smoking cavity. The gardener did not fall. It simply looked down at the wound, curious, almost fondly, and then the flash-burned tissue knit closed, fibers sliding back together like buds resealing in morning dew. Then, the others began to approach, not rushing, not threatening, just walking, closing distance. I shouted for a fallback line. The squad retreated to defensive formation, boots sinking slightly into the soft, breathing soil. The fog thickened. Their silhouettes multiplied. Dozens, maybe hundreds. Their chants rose, a lullaby spoken in a tongue part memory, part sickness, part worship. The words crawled under the skin. We tend, we care, we comfort, we grow. Guardsman Harl dropped his rifle. Tears streamed down his face. They're not hostile, he whispered. They're offering peace. He stepped forward. The fog swallowed him. We heard a wet embrace, like arms wrapping around a body, pulling him into warmth. No scream, just a sigh, like a man finally allowed to rest. The humming strengthened. The fog swirled. The gardeners vanished. But one remained, the one with Fenn's smile. It looked straight at me and mouthed, silently, "You will understand soon." We found Guardsman Harl at dawn, or rather, what he had become. His body was kneeling, upright at the edge of the eastern slope, facing the rising sun. His back was straight, head bowed slightly, arms hanging loose at his sides. For a moment, I thought he was simply praying. Then I saw that his hands were gone, not torn, not severed, absorbed. His wrists tapered directly into the ground, flesh merging into the soft, pulsing soil, like roots sinking deep into loam. New growth had begun along his spine, green stalks rising from beneath skin that had stretched too thin. Bulb-like pods swelled from his shoulder blades. The air around him smelled of honeyed decay. Lieutenant Strake approached slowly. "Harl, Guardsman, if you are able to respond, do so now." No movement. The pods along his spine quivered. Strake reached out. Magos Kyle 3V snapped a mechadendrite across the lieutenant's chest, stopping him. "Do not touch," the Magos hissed. "It is grafting. The host is still alive." Alive. I felt my stomach tighten. I stepped closer. Harl's lips were moving. Not speech, breathing. A slow inhale, a thin exhale. And on the exhale I heard it. Warm. Rest. No more pain. The prayer. The promise the gardeners had spoken in the fog. Sergeant Dawn raised his rifle. "We put him out of his misery. Now." But Magos Kyle 3V blocked him again. "No. Observation is required. Specimen transformation stage is incomplete." Specimen. That was when the argument began. Dawn. "This is a man." The Magos. "This is progression." Strake. "Stand down. Both of you." But even he sounded uncertain. The pods on Harl's back split open with a damp crack. Pale tendrils unfurled, coiling gently upward like vines seeking the sun. They swayed, tasting the air, and Harl smiled. He did not open his eyes. He did not speak. But the smile was real, soft, content, the smile of a man without fear. The ground beneath him pulsed, once, like a deep heartbeat. I felt it through my boots. The soil was not just alive. It was aware. Strake stepped back. "Burn it." The Magos protested, but the lieutenant was already signaling the flamer unit. Promethium washed over the body. The tendrils writhed, the pods shriveled. The smile never left his face, even as the flesh blackened, curled, and fell away in drifting ash. When it was done, the ground beneath his charred remains still glistened, still warm, still breathing. We stood in silence. No victory, no relief, just the lingering scent of flowers and fire. I recorded the event in the mission log under biological contamination. Stage 1 vector bloom. But privately, I wrote something else. He did not look afraid. That was the first sign I should have seen. The corruption does not begin in the flesh. It begins in the heart. We relocated the command post to higher ground, if such a concept still applied on a world where the earth behaved like breathing tissue. The engineers reinforced the perimeter with steel plating. But even that felt foolish. How does one fortify a position against the planet itself? Magos Kyle 3V requested a mobile medici shelter for his research. I was ordered to assist. Inside, the sample from the trench was suspended in an isolation vat. Under magnification, the structure revealed itself not as plant matter, nor fungal tissue, but a hybrid lattice of muscle and mycelium, interlaced with microcapillaries that pulsed with slow, rhythmic fluid exchange. The Magos performed a microdissection. The tissue reacted, not reflexively, but in a manner that suggested awareness. The fibers tightened away from the blade, curling like a frightened animal. Adaptive biosyncretism, the Magos murmured. This world is not simply corrupted, it is cultivated. By who? I asked. The Magos did not answer. Instead, he extracted a filament cluster and placed it under neural frequency stimulation. The tissue sang, not audibly, but through the resonance monitors, a harmonic pattern, repeating, structured, as if the tissue itself carried memory, a voice encoded in living matter. Dawn refused to enter the Medici shelter again. He said he could feel the samples watching him. In truth, I could not dismiss the same sensation. We informed the colonel. He ordered a full upward Vox contact to Fleet Command. The transmission returned, but not from orbit. It played from the planet. A ringing tone, then wet static, followed by a recorded voice. Do not burn the gardens, they are his joy. The voice was imperial, female, calm, recorded through a standard command Vox amplifier. Timestamp 432 years prior. The camp fell silent. Strake requested the message again. The Vox repeated, do not burn the gardens, they are his joy. Not a warning, a plea. The Magos cogitator began pulling data from the planetary archives. What returned was fragmented, but enough to assemble the truth. Gorst Null had not been abandoned during war. It had been a shrine farm world, an experimental agri-colony dedicated to producing alchemical nutrient stock for imperial relief fleets. Its priests oversaw seasonal harvest rites, blessing the soil. But at some point, something grew too well. Something answered the prayers. Something listened to the hymns of nurturing, tending, caring. Something that loves growth. Nurgle. The transformation did not happen quickly. Records showed slow morphological changes over centuries. The planet was not corrupted in an instant. It was gardened, cultivated, loved into decay. Strake ordered every soldier to remain masked, every wound sealed, every thought of comfort treated as contamination. But I saw the fear in their eyes, not of death, of warmth, of rest, of wanting it. The humming returned that evening, softer now, like a lullaby sung to us directly beneath the skin, not to frighten, to soothe, to invite. Night fell with unnatural speed. Cloud cover rolled over the sky like a lid closing, smothering the last of the daylight. Our watch posts switched to lumen beacons and motion sweeps, but visibility was poor. The mist had thickened again, clinging close to the ground. The air vibrated, the hum now richer, layered with undertones. It was no longer a single resonance. It was voices. Dozens at first, then hundreds. A low, continuous choral breathing rising from beneath the soil, as if the entire world were quietly singing to itself. We tried to ignore it. We cleaned weapons, we checked flamer reserves, we recited the litany of steel. But the sound threaded itself between words and breaths, slipping into the mind like warmth through a blanket. Guardsman Wren began to cry softly. No sobs, just tears streaming down his cheeks. He stared at his hands as though seeing them for the first time. I forgot what it felt like to be held, he whispered. No one responded. We heard shuffling outside the perimeter, not marching, not stalking, just wandering. Shapes in the mist again, the gardeners. Their movements slow, unthreatening, almost mournful. Some carried tools, curved pruning knives, small spades fashioned from bone and rusted metal. They did not approach closer than 20 meters. They simply watched us, waiting, listening, swaying with the choir. Strake ordered floodlights. The beams cut through the fog and illuminated hundreds of them, rows of gardeners, silent, reverent, their robes mottled with lichen, fronds of moss sprouting along their sleeves. Some of their faces bore no features at all, just smooth flesh. as if expressions had been worn away by decades of soft, loving hands. Private Giral raised his rifle. I reached out and forced it down, not out of fear, but because I knew if we fired, they would not fall. They would simply continue, and some part of us would break. The chorus swelled. The ground pulsed with it. A slow heartbeat felt in the soles of our boots. One beat, then another, then spores. They drifted down from the mist, glimmering faintly in the lumen light, soft as snow, harmless seeming. They clung to skin, armor, weapons, tiny flecks of pale green, masks held, but it did not matter. The spores did not need to be breathed to take root. They only needed to rest, to touch, to wait. Ren began laughing, a soft, quiet sound, not hysterical, not frightened, happy. He pressed his forehead to the ground. "It's warm," he whispered. "It's always been warm. We just forgot." Magos Kyle 3V administered a sedative, but Rain continued smiling even unconscious. The gardeners turned away, as if satisfied. The mist retreated. The choir softened. But the spores remained, clinging to us, to the ground, to the walls of the shelter. Waiting. We could not sweep them away. We could only watch as they glowed faintly in the darkness, like embers still breathing after flame. When I finally lay down, I realized the hum had moved inside my skull. Not around me, within me. And I was not afraid. Not yet. The spores were in the air for less than 12 hours before symptoms appeared. Not illness, not fever, not decay, memory. The first to show signs was Lieutenant Strake. He was seated at the command table, helm sealed, armor flawless, posture rigid in the disciplined stance of a lifelong officer. He was reviewing troop rotations when he stopped speaking mid-sentence. His lips parted slightly, his eyes unfocused. "Hail," he said quietly. "Do you smell bread?" I did not. None of us did. Strake inhaled again, slow, trembling, and a tear slid down his cheek. "My mother used to bake bread on Saint's Day, before the scholar took me. I had forgotten the sound the crust made when it cracked." He smiled. Not madness, not hysteria. Grief twisted into tenderness. He was remembering something precious, something the war had long since burned out of him, but the spores had given it back. He blinked rapidly, awareness returning in fragments. His voice thickened. "This is a weapon," he said. "A kindness used as a blade. Because what soldier, after decades of war, after watching comrades die screaming, after burning, shooting, bleeding, and breaking, does not crave comfort? And Nurgle is nothing if not comfort twisted into rot. By the time the Medici scans returned, they only confirmed what we already knew. The spores had not targeted our lungs, they had targeted our minds. Bone marrow cultures revealed new cellular structures forming alongside hematopoietic tissue. The spores had rooted in the bloodstream, but they were not destroying us. They were joining us, synchronizing, threading themselves through the nervous system like vines creeping up a trellis. Magos Kyle 3V examined one of the encoded tissue samples under neural frequency harmonic resonance. The screen flickered with patterns, swirls, spirals, shapes repeating in fractal loops. Not random, a message, not words, emotion, warmth, belonging, the promise of no more pain. The choir outside the camp swelled again, deeper now, more resonant. No longer distant, no longer environmental. It was coming through the soil, the air, the blood, through us. Private Dawn, who had been the loudest voice of resistance, stared at his hands as though they were someone else's. "My bones don't ache," he whispered, for the first time since Myrak's trench. Not since... He trailed off. He didn't need to finish. I knew. We all knew. War ages a man from the inside out. Nurgle's garden made war stop hurting. That was the seduction. Not grand miracles, not power, just the relief of suffering. And suffering in our world is endless. It was Guardsman Rain who said the words aloud, voice quiet and reverent. It's not infection. It's mercy. Strake struck him hard enough to bloody his lip. Wren only smiled as he wiped the blood away. No more fear, Lieutenant. Don't. You want that. The room fell silent. Because yes, we all wanted that. And that was the danger. The infection did not invade. It offered. The gardeners emerged again at dusk, visible beyond the perimeter in long lines. Some knelt, some dug, some planted. Their robes trailed along the ground like roots dragging behind them. None approached, none attacked, because there was no need. Seeds only germinate after the soil chooses to accept them. We watched them work for hours, unable to look away. They tended to growths we could not see. They smoothed the breathing soil. They whispered to the earth like mothers soothing children to sleep. Their voices carried on the wind. Rest your weary bones. Be held. Be known. Be loved. Rain's breathing hitched. He stepped forward, but I caught his arm and held him back. Strake's command vox cracked. No one leaves the perimeter. Anyone who tries is shot. But the words rang hollow, because we were no longer guarding against attack. We were guarding against longing. That night, as I tried to sleep, I dreamed. Not a nightmare. A memory. My sister, as she had been when we were children, laughing, chasing fireflies under a summer dusk on Casa Adriel. The sky blue, the air cool, the sound of her joy brighter than any hymn I had ever heard. And in the dream, she turned to me and smiled, cupping something in her hands. A seed. Plant it, she said, so you don't have to hurt anymore. When I awoke, my face was wet with tears. I looked at my palms. They were dusted with faint green luminance. Spore bloom. Stage 2. We had not simply been exposed. We had accepted. The infection was not entering us. We were opening ourselves to it. And the most terrifying part was, it felt like coming home. We woke to singing. Not the low choral hum from beneath the earth, not the distant resonance of the gardeners, but human voices. Familiar ones. The voices of our own men. Guardsmen who should have been asleep in bunks, exhausted from patrol, instead stood at the eastern embankment, facing the burning horizon where the mist gathered and swirled. They stood barefoot on the living soil, armor discarded, helmets dropped, laser guns abandoned like shed skins. They swayed gently, the same rhythm the gardeners used. When I approached, I recognized one of them, Private Morin, a quiet man, a good soldier. Years in the trenches had carved grief into the lines of his face, but now, his expression was soft, peaceful. The exhaustion that had always shadowed him was gone. His eyes glowed faintly green in the rising dawn. "Morin," I said, "return to the perimeter at once." He didn't turn, didn't look at me. He smiled at the horizon. "It doesn't hurt anymore." His voice was calm, clear, unshaken. Strake drew his sidearm. "Private Morin, this is your final." But Morin did not speak to Strake. He spoke to me. "You felt it too. Sergeant Hale, in the dream, the warmth, the peace." My pulse tightened in my throat. He could not have known. Wren knelt beside him, eyes half-lidded, breathing slow and reverent. "They are not our enemy," Wren murmured. "They are saving us." Strake fired. Morin fell, or should have. His body staggered, and then held. The wound did not bleed. The bullet wound bloomed. The torn flesh unfurled like petals opening. Soft, pink, gentle. New skin grew beneath the damage, knitting shut with impossible speed, leaving only faint scar tissue like the delicate seams inside a flower's stem. Morin turned, finally turned, and looked at Strake. Not with anger, with disappointment. "You resist because you are afraid," he said, "but there is nothing to fear. He is love. He is rest. He is the end of suffering." Strake fired again. Morin did not fall. He stepped forward. Wren placed a hand on Strake's rifle, lowering it. "Sir," he said softly, "you don't have to fight anymore. We're tired. We're all so tired. Strake struck him, hard, across the jaw. Ren stumbled but did not retaliate. Instead, he smiled. That will stop hurting soon too. The fracture in the regiment became visible then. Not shouted, not violent, but revealed in the stillness after that moment. Two groups formed without being ordered. Those who clung to discipline, and those who wanted to be released. Dawn whispered under his breath, "Emperor, preserve us." But even his voice carried doubt. The Magos observed everything without emotional response, mechadendrites twitching in slow, analytical patterns. "This is not death," he said. "This is conversion, a biological, psychological, and mimetic transformation vector. We are witnessing an assimilation ecology, a nurturing one." "Nurturing," Strake repeated, voice cracking. "This is corruption." "Corruption," the Magos replied calmly, "is a moral term. This is adaptation." The words hung between us like a blade. A distant sound rose across the plains, a trumpet call made of wind and breath and bone-deep resonance. The gardeners answered, kneeling as one. The soil pulsed beneath our feet, a heartbeat. Slow, steady, lulling. Command should have mobilized then, should have enacted exterminatus-level containment or tactical withdrawal. But Strake did not give the order. He sagged, just slightly, just enough for us to see the cost. Years of war had carved him hollow. Morin stepped forward again. "It's all right to stop," he said gently. "It's all right to rest. No more fighting, no more burning, no more watching men die screaming. He ends all pain." I saw Strake's hand tremble. The colonel attempted to speak, but his voice broke. We have a duty." Morin smiled, warm, patient, almost fatherly. "Your duty was to endure. You have done that, more than most men could bear. Let it end." For one impossible heartbeat, I thought Strake would fall to his knees. But he didn't. Instead, he looked at me. His eyes were red, wet, terrified. "Hail," he whispered. "If I falter, you finish this. Do you understand?" My throat tightened. I nodded. I did not know if I lied. Rain took Morin's hand. They walked toward the mist, toward the gardeners, toward the choir, not trembling, not screaming, walking like men returning home. No blood, no fight, just release. The mist swallowed them. The harmonic hum deepened. The soil beneath our boots exhaled, warm as breath against skin. The rot was not death. The rot was comfort. The rot was love. And that was what made it unstoppable. We lost 12 more men before noon. Not to violence, not to wounds, to acceptance. Some walked into the mist alone. Some knelt in the soil and let themselves be taken slowly, their bodies sinking inch by inch like seeds returning to earth. Some simply lay down and closed their eyes, and the garden welcomed every one of them. Strake's voice was gone, not physically, but in spirit. He gave orders with the hollow insistence of ritual. Soldiers followed, because there was nothing else to do. The idea of withdrawal was meaningless. Withdrawal from what? The ground itself, the air. The world was infected, and we were part of it now. It was the Magos who broke the paralysis. "There is a central growth locus," he said, projecting a holomap composed of scanning data and harmonic resonance patterns. "A vascular core, a root heart. If we are to disrupt the ecology, we must locate and neutralize that organ." Strake stared at the projection. Neutralize. With what? "Melter," the Magos answered simply, "and faith." Even then the word carried no conviction. Yet we marched. 10 of us remained, hollow-eyed, armor-stained, boots coated in soil that clung like living tissue. The choir followed us, soft, ever-present, like the world's breath. We reached a slope where the ground sagged in a long depression, a collapsed cavern. The air there was warm and wet, like the inside of a living chest. Vines of veined, pulsing growth lined the descent. As we approached, the earth opened, not violently, like a flower unfurling. A circular aperture widened in the breathing soil, revealing a dark tunnel descending into the planet's inner flesh. Someone whispered a prayer. I do not remember who. We descended. The walls pulsed with slow waves of vascular contraction. The floor was slick, not with blood, but with nutrient fluid, viscous and amber bright. The air shimmered with spores, glowing faintly like dust moving through sunlight. No one coughed. Breathing was easy now, almost too easy. The deeper we went, the more the architecture changed. At first there were hints, ghostly remnants of structured angles, straight lines, and crafted stone where the growth had not erased everything. Then we saw it fully. The remains of a cathedral, a vast nave, once of white stone and stained glass, now entombed in living tissue. Pillars swallowed halfway into meat, altars overgrown with soft fungal blooms, iconography of the emperor worn smooth, erased by time and slow, tender overgrowth. Not desecrated, absorbed. The cathedral was not destroyed. It was digested into the garden. Reen had once told us he was an altar boy in childhood. He used to hold candles while the priest spoke liturgy. I saw something break in his face as he stepped forward, reaching out to touch the pulsing wall. It's beautiful, he whispered. Strake caught his wrist before his fingers made contact. No more touching anything, Strake said. His voice was stronger now. Fear had hardened into resolve. No more joining, no more surrender. Reen looked at him, sorrowful. You're still fighting, he murmured. You don't have to. But Strake did not release him. He held on. Dawn pointed ahead, deeper into the ruined nave. Someone's there. We raised weapons. A figure knelt at the altar, or what remained of it. Once human, now stretched thin, body interwoven with flowered sinew and glistening root tissue. His back rose and fell with slow, reverent breath. A priest. His voice, when he spoke, was soft, warm, worn smooth by centuries of prayer. You have come to see the heart, he said. He did not turn. He did not need to. You have suffered long. You have carried weight no mortal should carry. You do not need to bear it anymore. Strake raised his rifle. The priest continued speaking. You are tired. Let the garden hold you. Let the Father gather you. Let the rot carry you into peace. The choir swelled. The soil pulsed beneath our feet. Ren fell to his knees. Dawn grabbed him, but Ren smiled. I want to go home. Strake screamed. Not a command, but a plea. Stand up! But Rain did not. He bowed his head. The floor opened beneath him like a mouth, and he sank, gently, slowly, lovingly, into the warm, pulsing earth. Not consumed, planted, and the garden exhaled, as though in joy. We were running out of men, running out of faith, running out of selves, and the heart of the world waited just ahead, beating slow and steady and welcoming. The priest did not look at us at first. He remained bowed before the altar, his hands folded over one another like someone at prayer. The walls around him pulsed slowly, as though breathing with him, or he with them. The air was warm, moist, dense enough to taste. Every breath felt like it coated the tongue with honeyed rot. Strake approached him with weapon raised. Identify yourself, the lieutenant commanded. His voice was raw, frayed by exhaustion, grief, and something close to surrender. But still, he stood. The priest exhaled, not a sigh. A release, as one might offer, after finally being understood. I'm what remains of Haradikon Seraphil of the shrine farm of Gorst Null, he said softly. Once shepherd of the harvest, once caretaker of the fields. He turned then. His face was stretched thin over bone, yet somehow soft, no agony, no fear. Skin had fused seamlessly with the growths around him, as though his flesh was simply one more vine, one more root, one more petal in the vast garden. His eyes were clear, gentle, ancient. Do not be afraid, he said. You are among kin here. Strake took a step back, and I saw it. A flicker in his eyes, recognition. This priest had not been conquered. He had chosen. Seraphel smiled, a small, weary smile of a man who has watched centuries pass like seasons. When the Emperor's creed came here, we prayed for life to endure, for crops to grow strong, for sustenance to be abundant. We asked for his love to nourish the soil. His fingers trailed along the pulsing altar. And he answered, the priest whispered. Just, not in the form we expected. Dawn spat. You prayed to the Emperor, but it was Nurgle who heard. Yes, Seraphel said simply, with no shame, because he listens to the prayers of the broken, the weary, the starving, the unwanted, the forgotten. He looked at us, really looked, and it felt like his gaze rested on the parts of us we kept buried, the ache, the exhaustion, the grief. You have suffered, he said, so much, too much, and the garden saw you. It reached for you. It welcomed you. Strake's hands trembled around his rifle. No, he rasped. I won't let it take us. I won't let it devour us. Seraphel stepped down from the altar. His movements were slow, fluid, as though guided by vines beneath his skin. He left soft impressions in the pulsing floor with each step. You do not understand, he said gently. This is not devouring. The garden does not consume. He placed his hand on his heart. It transforms. I felt my stomach turn, not from revulsion, but from recognition. Because yes, that was the truth we had been approaching since the first spore landed on our armor. This world was not dying. It was becoming. Seraphel spread his arms in quiet devotion. This world is a blessing, a sanctuary from suffering, a place where fear dissolves and love is the soil itself. For what is rot, if not the end of pain? What is bloom, if not the promise of rebirth? His voice softened. You have carried burdens no mortal should carry. Let them fall. Let yourselves be held. Let yourselves be known. Come home to him. Strake's resolve broke in stages, like glass cracking before it shatters. His breathing grew uneven. His weapon lowered a fraction, and that was all it took. Seraphel stepped closer. Let it end! Strake's rifle clattered to the floor. Dawn reached for him, but the priest moved faster. Not with violence, with invitation. Arms opening, hands gentle, pulling Strake forward into a warm embrace. For a moment, Strake leaned into it. For a moment, he wept. For a moment, he looked like a man being held after a lifetime of war. Then Seraphel's voice softened to a whisper only we could hear. You are seeds, my children. You were always meant to bloom. And his torso split open, not torn, unfolded. Petals of flesh parted like the opening of a flower, revealing a cavity filled with writhing, pale larvae, each the length of a finger, their bodies slick with nutrient fluid, their mouths soft, searching. They spilled forward, gently, hungrily, reaching for Strake's exposed neck, arms, mouth, eyes. Dawn screamed. I moved without thinking. I fired. The blast tore the larvae apart, splattering the altar with steaming pulp. Seraphel staggered, not in pain, but in sorrow. You reject love, he whispered. We pulled Strake back, his armor slick with larvae, his breath ragged, and ran. Behind us, the priest's voice rose in lamentation. Children of war, why do you cling to suffering when rest is here? The choir answered him. The earth exhaled, and the heart of the world began to wake. Not because we believed escape was possible, but because the instinct to flee death, or something pretending to be mercy, is older than doctrine, older than training, older than faith. The tunnel walls pulsed around us as we climbed, vascular contractions rippling like we were inside the throat of some patient, breathing titan. The choir rose behind us, no longer soothing. The harmonies fractured, sharpened, took on teeth. A million whispers layered into a single phrase. Do not fear, do not fear, do not fear. The repetition made the words lose meaning, dissolving into pure compulsion. Strake stumbled. His breathing was ragged. His skin was pale, too pale, and the veins beneath it glowed faintly green. The larvae had not fully taken hold, but the seeds of infection had rooted. He leaned against the wall, and the wall held him. Mold-soft tendrils brushed the back of his neck like comforting fingers. Don't, I snapped, pulling him away. Focus. Stay with us. He nodded, but his eyes were wet. He missed the embrace. We reached the collapsed cavern entrance. The daylight outside was dim, filtered through heavy mist. The garden stretched in all directions, plains of gentle swaying growth, soft breathing soil, rows of gardeners tending unseen crops. They didn't see us. They didn't need to. The garden had patience. Dawn rallied what remained of our unit, 5 soldiers, if the word still applied. 2 stood shaking. 1 whispered prayers to the Emperor in a tone that sounded like apology rather than faith. Strake sank to his knees. His voice was hollow. We can't win. No one argued. Winning had ceased to be a relevant concept. The Magos stepped forward, his movements slow, precise, deliberate. He accessed the tactical uplink node built into his spine and projected a holo display. It showed the planetary circulatory pattern, every root network, every vascular expansion, every pulse locus. This world is not metaphorically a garden, he said. It is an organ. The entire planet is a single, living, integrated ecology. He pointed to a central region deep beneath the crust. The heart root. If we destroy it, the system collapses. The garden dies. Dawn swallowed. Do we even have enough firepower? Yes, the Magos said, if we are willing to die with it. The silence that followed was suffocating. Death we understood. We had lived beside it our entire lives. But this was not death. This was refusal. Refusal of peace, refusal of relief, refusal of love. Strake looked at me. His eyes were old, older than any man's had the right to be. Hail, he whispered. Tell me the truth. Do you want to stop suffering? I wanted to lie. I wanted to say no, to claim incorruptible loyalty, unbroken faith, iron discipline. But the truth tore itself from me like confession. Yes. Strake's tears fell freely now. So do I, he said. He closed his eyes. But we don't get to. He pushed himself to his feet, swaying, trembling. Send coordinates to the fleet, he ordered the Magos. Request cyclonic melter saturation on this location. Trigger on signal. We go back to the heart route. We plant charges manually. When the Bloomwalker arrives... He stopped, because he didn't need to finish. We all knew. Someone would have to stay behind to detonate. Someone would have to hold the line. Strake turned to me. Hail, Sergeant Archivist, the one who sees, the one who remembers. You write the report, he said. You tell them what happened here. You make them believe it. His voice cracked. And you remember us. I did not salute. I could not. I only nodded. The gardeners began to gather at the edges of the clearing, hundreds of them, their forms swaying gently, robes rustling like leaves, not advancing, just waiting. Strake stepped forward to face them. He was no longer trembling. He stood like a soldier again. One last time. We move, he said. We return to the opening in the earth, to the path of veins and pulsing light, to the heart of the garden, to the place where we would end it. The air thickened with warm sweetness, heavy enough to taste. The choir rose, and the garden spoke through every blade of grass. Rest. We answered with flame. The descent back into the depths did not feel like movement through space. It felt like being drawn in, the way breath is drawn into lungs. The planet was no longer an environment, it was a body, and we had been swallowed a second time. The tunnel pulsed with the slow rhythm of something ancient and content. The walls were no longer subtle about their nature. Striated, layers of meat and mycelial root merged into one another, shifting with the gentle contractions of circulation. Every step we took left indentations in the warm tissue underfoot, and every indent slowly lifted back into place behind us, sealing the path. There would be no retreat. Not that any of us expected one. We carried melter charges, promethium canisters, ignition filaments, thermal cutters, tools not of conquest, but of erasure. Strake walked ahead of us, not with purpose, but with acceptance. His flesh had begun to change. The faint green luminescence had spread along his veins, mapping his circulatory system beneath his skin like glowing roots. His breathing had slowed. Calm, controlled, otherworldly. The garden was welcoming him, and he was not resisting. But he still walked forward, duty and surrender in the same body. I wanted to speak to him, to ask what he felt, what he feared, if anything. But there are questions that cannot be spoken between soldiers. There is only walking forward together. The choir rose again, but now it was internal, not heard through air, but through blood. A sound vibrating inside the marrow, a gentle hum, like a mother shushing a child back to sleep. We emerged into the cathedral once more, except now it breathed with visible motion. The walls expanded and contracted in slow, rhythmic waves. Thick clusters of fungal blossoms pulsed with golden-green luminescence. The altar had unfurled into a great blooming mass of wet petals, slick and fragrant with decay that was somehow sweet. The priest was there, or what remained of him. His form had fully opened. Petals of flesh spread wide like a flower in full bloom. His face was serene, peaceful. There was no agony, no fear, only stillness. The garden had completed him. Strake did not look at him. He did not need to. We pushed deeper, through the cathedral's back wall, now grown into a corridor of branching veins. Heat radiated from ahead, not the dry heat of fire, but the humid heat of living tissue operating at full metabolic cycle. We heard it before we saw it. The heartbeat, slow, heavy, patient, not rushing, not struggling. A heart that had all the time in the universe. Then we entered the heart-root chamber. It was vast, a great sphere hollowed into the subterranean growth, lined with vascular ridges and thick ropes of pulsing tissue. At its center hung a colossal seed heart, suspended by hundreds of tendril-like arteries. It pulsed with light, soft green radiance expanding and fading in time with its beat. It was beautiful, it was horrifying, it was alive. Dawn swore under his breath, not out of fear, but awe. Magos Kyle 3V stepped forward, mechadendrites already unfurling charge anchors. "This organ is self-regenerative," he announced. "We must oversaturate. Apply charges at all vascular junctions, maximum spread." Strake nodded. He lifted his melter pack and paused. His hand was shaking, not with fear, with longing. His voice was barely above a whisper. I can hear it. No one asked what. We knew. The garden was speaking to him, inviting him, embracing him. Dawn and I moved quickly, pressing melter charges into the arterial ridges, wiring ignition nodes across the chamber's inner surface. The heat in the air increased. Sweat mixed with the faint luminescent spores on our skin, creating smears of green-gold light. I checked my chronometer. 7 minutes until ignition. We turned to withdraw, and the ground shifted, not collapsing, not attacking, opening. Roots drew back like curtains. From the depths of the chamber floor, something rose, something vast, something shaped like a man, but grown from meat and blossom and mold, towering twice our height. Its limbs were wrapped in vines of muscle. Its skin was soft, petaled, layered. Its face, if face it was, bore the suggestion of features, arranged in serene paternal calm. A bloomwalker, a shepherd of the garden, not a monster, a caretaker. The choir surged, warm, welcoming. The bloomwalker extended its arms, not in violence, in embrace. Strake stepped forward, his weapon lowered, his breathing slow, his voice soft. I am so tired. I moved. I didn't think. I acted. I struck Strake, hard, driving him back. He fell to his knees, gasping, not in pain, but in loss. The Bloomwalker regarded me, silently, mournfully, and stepped closer. The air thickened with heat and sweetness. My lungs filled with warmth. The choir spoke through the blood in my veins. Let go. Let go. Let go. My hands trembled. My resolve cracked. My vision blurred. The Bloomwalker touched my cheek, gentle, warm, fatherly. You have suffered enough, the voice whispered inside me. You deserve rest. For a moment, I believed it. For a moment, I leaned forward. Then I remembered Morin sinking into the soil, Rain whispering, I want to go home. Harl smiling while his spine bloomed gardens. And I remembered why we fight. Not for glory, not for victory, but because if we do not resist, there will be no one left who remembers we tried. I activated the ignition sequence. The Bloomwalker froze, not in fear, in sadness. Strake looked up at me, eyes full of grief and pride. You stayed, he whispered. The chamber brightened. Heat roared. The melter charges detonated. The heartroot ignited. Veins burst. The garden screamed. The world shook. The choir became wailing thunder. We ran as the flesh tunnels convulsed, collapsing around us, boiling, blistering, burning. The living architecture of the planet tore itself apart, membranes blistering, veins rupturing, spores vaporizing in superheated air. Dawn fell behind. Magos Kyle 3V's chassis melted from within. Strake did not rise, but I ran. I ran while the world burned. I ran until I saw daylight again, and the garden died screaming. The world above was already burning, not with fire alone, but with collapse. The very ground shifted under my boots as I emerged from the fleshy tunnel, the earth rising and falling in convulsions. The plains, once gentle fields of breathing soil, now bucked and cracked like the surface of a dying beast. Thick cords of muscle writhed beneath the topsoil, spasming in waves that rolled across the horizon. The choir had become something else entirely. No longer soothing, no longer tender. The harmony had collapsed into a wail, a sound like a grieving parent holding a dying child. It echoed across the sky, vibrating the bones in my chest. I stumbled forward, coughing, lungs burning from residual melter vapor. Spores were still present in the air, glowing faintly, but they no longer drifted like gentle snow. They scattered in chaotic bursts, their patterns undone, their purpose broken. The garden was dying, but not quietly. Behind me, the tunnel entrance collapsed, sealing itself in a convulsion of shredded membrane and scorched root. Strake did not emerge. Dawn did not emerge. The Magos was gone, melted to slag and hollowed metal. I was the only one who had reached the surface, the only one left. For a moment, just a moment, I allowed myself to kneel. My hands pressed into the trembling soil. It was still warm, still soft, still alive. And beneath the trembling, beneath the spasms, beneath the final collapse, I felt something else. Grief. The garden was not angry. It was mourning. And then the earth in front of me rose, slowly, deliberately, with the steady inevitability of a seed breaking open, roots and tendrils twisted together, forming legs, vines braided into arms, blossoms and moss unfurled into robes. And at last, from the apex of the growth, a face emerged, not human, but shaped in imitation of one, a soft, sorrowful visage made from layered petals and gentle rot. The Bloomwalker had followed me, but it was not the same as the one below. That one had been a caretaker, a guide. This one was a guardian, the final shepherd of the dying garden. It stepped toward me, slow, smooth, graceful, despite its immense size. The ground steadied where it walked, as though the planet itself leaned toward it, seeking comfort. It did not raise its arms in threat. It opened them to embrace. The choir, dampened now, fractured and weak, surged one final time. Do not fear, do not fear, do not fear. My weapon hung useless at my side. I had no charge packs left, no promethium, no melter. I had nothing that could kill something grown from the sorrow of the world itself. The Bloomwalker regarded me with eyes that did not blink. It was not angry at me. It did not hate me. It understood what I had done. It simply wished I had chosen differently. Its voice was not sound but memory. You suffer, child. Let it end. Let yourself be held. The warmth pressed into my mind again. The promise of peace, of release, of an end to all storms. I saw Harl smiling as the garden opened him, Rain walking into the mist without fear, Morin speaking of the absence of pain, and behind them all, Strake leaning into the priest's arms for just a moment of comfort before the larvae spilled forth. They had not been tricked, they had been offered relief, and they had accepted. The Bloomwalker's vast, petalled hand rested on my cheek. Gentle, tender, a father's touch. A tear slid down my face, not from pain, not from fear, but from the unbearable weight of being asked to refuse love, because that is what Nurgle's garden is, not corruption, not evil. Love without end, love without pain, love without choice. A world where suffering is dissolved. And so are you. And I understood then why we fight, why the Imperium condemns mercy when offered by rot, why suffering is allowed to continue, why hope must remain fragile. Because if we are given a world without pain, we become something less than human. The Bloomwalker lifted me gently, as though I weighed nothing. It pulled me close, the way a parent holds a crying child. I let myself lean into it. Just for a moment, and then I acted. My hand found the melter detonator clipped to Strake's harness, still strapped across my chest. Its ignition rune cracked but functional. A dead man's last gift. I did not speak. The Bloomwalker did not resist. It only looked at me with sorrow. I pressed the rune. The explosion was not fire this time. It was unmaking. The Bloomwalker's body burst in a bloom of soft petals and luminous fluid, scattering like dandelion seeds into the wind. The shockwave tore the surrounding ground apart, sending up showers of soil and flesh. The world shook. The choir broke into one final shattering cry. And then, silence. No hum, no pulse, no breath. The garden was dead. I fell to my knees. The air was still warm, but the warmth now came only from memory. The soil beneath my hands no longer moved. No heartbeat, no comfort, only ash. I closed my eyes, and for the first time since we landed, I felt truly, unbearably, utterly alone. When the garden died, the silence was the first thing I noticed. Not the silence of empty fields or dead battlefields. Not the respectful quiet of a tomb. This was a hollowed silence, the kind that exists when something that once breathed, once pulsed, once sang, has been cut away from the universe. It was the silence of a missing heartbeat. The air no longer vibrated. The soil no longer rose and fell. The spores, once drifting gently like motes of light, now hung motionless, suspended in the stillness. They no longer glowed. They were just dust now. The garden's warmth was gone. The ground beneath my knees was already cooling. The scent of honeyed rot, once cloying, comforting, suffocating, was fading into something dry and brittle. Decay without, rebirth, death without bloom. The planet was now truly what imperial records had once falsely claimed it to be. A dead world. I lay there for a long time. I don't remember how long. Hours, perhaps. Days. Time had been measured by the garden's pulse, and now the world had no pulse at all. My breath was shallow, not from exertion, not from injury, from absence. The garden had been inside me, in my lungs, in my blood, in my dreams. I had felt its warmth. I had wanted it. And now that warmth was gone, all that remained was the shape of where it had been, like a friend who had been holding my hand, letting go. The ache was unbearable. I sat up slowly, joints aching, not from infection, not from injury, from being human again. The weakness of flesh returned all at once. My spine hurt, my knees burned, my chest tightened. Grief came roaring in, raw and unshaped. The garden had taken my pain away, and I had taken it back, because I had chosen to, because I had needed to. But the body remembers what it was like not to hurt, and it mourns the loss. I coughed once, a deep, racking cough. My throat tightened. I coughed again, harder. Wetness filled my mouth. I spat something onto the cooling earth. Green. A clotted glob of dark, glistening vascular tissue, like a seed that had failed to germinate. I stared at it. My lungs were not empty of the garden. The spores had been part of me long enough to root. The fire had killed the garden around me, but inside me, it had simply slowed, dormant, waiting, like a seed buried under winter frost. My hands trembled. A rational man would have called for immediate self-termination. But I am not rational. I am tired. I rose slowly and surveyed what was left of the plains. The landscape was scorched in great ragged arcs. Patches of soil had hardened into cracked clay. Flesh roots had withered, shriveling into fibrous husks. The trees, the breathing pillars, were now hollow, sagging towers of flaccid tissue collapsing under their own weight. The gardeners, the once human caretakers, lay still where they had stood. Their robes were damp with dew, but their bodies no longer pulsed. Their faces still held their peaceful expressions. They had died smiling. Rain, Morin, Harl, Strake. The names carried weight now, real weight, not just memory, burden, the kind you don't set down. I walked the battlefield, though battlefield was the wrong word. There had been no battle, only transition, only surrender, only endings. I found Strake near the collapse site, collapsed forward onto his knees, arms limp, head bowed, as if still braced for an embrace that would never come. I sat beside him. I did not close his eyes. They were already closed. He had gone before the flames hit him, before the rupture, before the end. He had found peace, for a breath, and then I had taken it from him. Duty, after all, is an ugly thing. There is no hymn for it, no prayer, no comfort. I spoke aloud, softly, because anything louder would have felt like a lie. You were right, sir, and wrong, and I don't know which mattered more. There was no answer. There was no choir to carry my words, only the wind. I stayed beside him until the sky darkened. Not night, something else. Ash cloud. Atmospheric collapse. The biosphere was unraveling. Of course it was. A garden cannot live without its heart. I looked to the horizon and saw plumes rising. Not flame, but decay. The ecosystem was returning to its base state. Unstructured organic matter, rot reclaiming itself. The world would not end quickly. It would dissolve slowly, a final kindness. I coughed again, harder, more green. My breath tasted sweet. I felt heat rising beneath my sternum. Not infection, memory. The garden had loved us, not well, not healthily, not safely, but completely. And though I had destroyed it, it had not left me. Not entirely, not forever. I pressed my palm to the ground beside Strake. The earth was cool now, but beneath the coolness, faint, so faint it might have been imagination, a pulse, not strong, not growing, just remembering itself. I closed my eyes, not in surrender, not in prayer, in grief, because I finally understood. The garden had not been trying to kill us. It had been trying to keep us, and I had been the one to let go. The storm never truly arrived. The sky simply dimmed until it resembled the shadowed inside of a ribcage. The air hung heavy, thick with the weight of something unfinished. The world did not feel empty, just paused, like a breath being held, like something waiting for its moment to return. I moved slowly across the ashen plain, not from exhaustion, though exhaustion had dug itself deep into my bones, but because the ground was unstable in its stillness. Without the rhythm of the garden's pulse beneath it, the soil felt brittle. It crumbled underfoot like the cracking surface of a frozen lake. There was no longer any sense of direction. Landmarks had dissolved into ruin. The breathing tree groves had collapsed into soft heaps. The choir pits had ruptured into hollow craters. The once lush plains of living, nurturing rot were now grey fields of tissue curling into dryness. Still, I felt watched, not by eyes, by memory. The spores inside me were quiet, but not gone. They lingered like warmth that refused to fade after a hand has been removed from your shoulder. Not infection, imprint. I made my way back to the landing site. The transport was still there, scorched, pitted, half swallowed by where the ground had once been soft. The side hatch hung open. The Vox console flickered weakly, power cells running on emergency reserve. I sat in the pilot's chair, though I had no intention of leaving. There was no fleet in orbit anymore. The orbital signatures were gone, scattered, silent, or withdrawn. Perhaps the fleet detected the contamination and fled. Perhaps they burned themselves rather than be taken. Or perhaps they waited for my signal. My fingers hovered over the transmit key. I did not press it. Somewhere inside, I already knew that summoning others here would only begin the cycle again. The garden had not been an invasion. It had been an answer. We pray for deliverance. We pray for peace. We pray for the end of pain. And something listens. Something patient. Something kind. Something that does not understand why we resist the very thing we beg for. I leaned back and closed my eyes. The silence was immense, not empty, vast. My breathing was slow, measured, too measured. I felt it then, a stirring beneath my ribs. Not motion, not growth, remembering, like roots recalling the shape of the soil they once lived in. My hand rose to my chest. I inhaled. The breath was warm, softer than before, almost gentle. The spores had not died with the garden. They were waiting for me. For my grief to soften, for my resolve to weaken, for the memory of peace to return as something unbearable in its absence. And it had. I could feel the temptation like a second heartbeat. Lay down. Let it happen. Be held. Be known. Be loved. I could choose it. Right now. I could kneel. I could press my palms to the cooling soil. I could close my eyes, and the garden would remember how to bloom. But then, I thought of Strake, not the moment of his embrace, not the moment of his near surrender. I remembered the moment after, when he realized he wanted the garden's love and still chose to stand. We do not fight because we are strong. We fight because someone must remember that resistance existed at all. I looked at my hands. They were shaking, not from fear, from memory. 2 futures rested inside them. I reached for the record slate instead of the soil. My voice was unsteady when I began to speak. This is Sergeant Archivist Serin Hale, 132nd Cadian Remnant, logging final record under clearance string AUX 777, unhallowed. The recorder's light flickered weakly. If this message reaches Inquisitorial Command, do not recover this world. Do not sanction recolonization. Do not deploy salvage units. Do not send purifiers. Do not return. Let the planet die. My breath hitched, not from conviction, from sorrow. Do not attempt to sterilize. Do not attempt to quarantine. Do not attempt to contain. The garden is not destroyed. It is dormant. The root remembers. I looked out across the grey plains, toward what had once been warmth and mercy, and the end of all suffering. It will return if it is watered with grief. The words tasted like truth, scraped raw. I swallowed, and then I spoke the hardest words of all. And grief always comes. The recorder continued blinking. There was more to say. I had to say it. This is not a warning to avoid contamination. This is a warning to avoid understanding, to know the garden is to want it, and once you want it, you will choose it. The wind stirred. The ash shifted. Something deep beneath the surface answered. Soft, faint, almost affectionate. I closed my eyes. The warmth rose in my lungs again. Not threatening, comforting. I let it rise, just for a breath. Then I exhaled. I ended the transmission. Not to the fleet, not to high command. I stored it in the transport's local archive, for whoever comes next. Someone always comes next. I stood slowly. My knees trembled. The world swayed. My chest ached. Not with disease, but with the memory of peace now lost. I walked away from the transport, into the grey, into the quiet, into the place where the garden once lived. And as I walked, I whispered, not to pray and not to summon, but because the words were already there, waiting, like a seed beneath winter earth. He loves us so very much. I kept walking, not sure if I was leaving the garden or returning to it. The Flesh Gardens of Nurgle, a Warhammer 40K horror story.